The letter was supposed to be classified forever, buried in a forgotten archive, locked behind clearance levels no one talked about. But last year, someone opened a box in the Pentagon basement, and inside were photographs, a burn-scarred M240 Bravo, and a handwritten note from a Navy SEAL commander. Without her, none of us would have made it out alive. If you believe courage is defined not by rank, not by size, but by heart, make sure to like and subscribe right now, because what you're about to hear is the untold story of how 6 SEALs were pinned down in a hostile valley, and how one woman in her late 20s rewrote the ending. It was late afternoon, somewhere deep in the Shai-Kot Valley of Afghanistan. The sun hung low, smearing the jagged ridges in gold and blood-red hues. A 6-man Navy SEAL recon element had been moving cautiously for hours, their boots silent against the crumbling shale, eyes scanning the horizon for movement. But what none of them knew, what none of them could have known, was that 40 insurgents were already watching from the ridgelines above, hidden in rock alcoves and thorn bushes, patient and waiting. The ambush began with a single crack, a sniper's shot that whistled past the team leader's ear before embedding itself in a boulder behind him. Then came the storm. Within seconds, machine gun fire erupted from 3 elevated positions, stitching the ground with tracer rounds. Dust exploded around them. Pebbles sprayed their faces. And then the first RPG screamed down from the cliffs, detonating in a concussive blast that hurled 2 SEALs off their feet. Contact. High Ridge, northeast. Chief Daniels' voice boomed over comms, but his words were nearly drowned by the roar of gunfire. The SEALs dove behind a crumbling mud wall, pressed into the dirt, hearts pounding so violently they could feel the vibrations in their fingertips. Bullets chewed chunks out of the wall with every burst, sending splinters of stone raining onto their backs. One operator, Petty Officer Blake, was already down, shrapnel tearing through his shoulder. Their medic? Lieutenant Kara Hayes, 28 years old, Army combat medic, attached to the SEAL platoon for this mission. She'd patched bullet wounds before. She'd stopped bleeding. She'd trained for chaos. But she had never seen anything like this. Her ears rang from the explosions, the acrid stench of cordite burning her nostrils. She felt the pounding of her own heartbeat pressing into her throat. Kara stole a glance over the shattered wall, just long enough to see muzzle flashes on the ridge. There were at least 3 PKM machine guns pouring fire down on their position. They were pinned, hard. She reached for her radio. Viper 2-1, this is Viper Medic. We need close air. We're getting hammered out here. But static screened back. The ridgelines killed their comms. For a split second, time stretched thin. She could hear Blake groaning in pain next to her. Could hear the chief swearing under his breath. Could hear the enemies shouting commands in Pashto somewhere above. And then, her eyes landed on it. 30 feet away, lying beside the motionless body of Petty Officer Reyes, was their M240 Bravo, the squad's only heavy weapon, their one chance to fight back. Its black frame glimmered faintly under the Afghan sun, like salvation itself. Kara's stomach turned cold. 30 feet might as well have been a mile. Out there was no cover, just open dirt and shattered debris. No sane person would run that gauntlet. Not with PKMs spraying constant bursts at head height. She turned toward Chief Daniels. "We need that gun," she said, voice low but steady despite the chaos. Daniels' jaw clenched as he leaned back, peeking over the wall for half a second before ducking as a bullet hissed past his cheek. "I'll send Lawson. He's closer." "No," Kara shook her head sharply. "Lawson's got the flank. We pull him, we're dead. I can get it." Daniels stared at her as though she'd lost her mind. "Negative, Lieutenant. You stay put. That's an order." Kara's eyes burned, not with fear, but with clarity. "Then we all die here," she said, her voice slicing through the air like steel. Before Daniels could stop her, Kara unbuckled her pack, yanked the tourniquet tight on Blake's shoulder to stem the bleeding, and crawled to the edge of their shattered cover. She took a deep breath, filling her lungs with hot, dusty air, and waited. She counted the bursts, the rhythm of the enemy's reloads. 1, 2, 3. Then she moved. Kara exploded from cover in a blur of motion, boots digging into the dirt, adrenaline ripping through her veins like electricity. Bullets screamed past her, so close she could feel the air snapping against her sleeves. The ground erupted in puffs of dust as rounds smacked inches from her boots. One slug tore through the fabric of her left arm, a burning sting flashing through her nerves, but she didn't slow down, not for a heartbeat. 15 feet. She hit the dirt hard as another RPG slammed into the far wall, the blast wave rolling over her like a truck. Her ears went muffled, replaced by a high-pitched ringing. Grit filled her teeth as she dragged herself forward, elbows scraping against the ground. She was so close. 10 feet. The enemy saw her now. Shouts echoed from the ridge as rifles pivoted, hurling controlled bursts directly at her. Rocks shattered inches from her face, peppering her cheeks with tiny cuts. Still, she crawled, one arm pulling, one knee driving into the dirt. 5 feet. Her fingers wrapped around the cold steel of the M240 Bravo, the weapon's weight grounding her against the chaos. She yanked the ammo belt free from Rhea's limp hand and shoved it under her arm, dragging both toward the wall. And then, as if the entire valley wanted her dead, a hail of rounds shredded the dirt around her boots. One smacked into the steel of the M240's receiver, sending sparks into her face. She ducked her head, clenched her teeth, and kept moving. Behind her, Daniel's voice roared, "Cover her! Lay it down!" The remaining SEALs rose just enough to return fire, dumping controlled bursts into the ridgelines, forcing the insurgents to flinch. That momentary pause gave Kara the window she needed. With one final, guttural scream, she dove the last 3 feet, crashing back behind cover with the M240 clutched to her chest. Her chest heaved violently, lungs screaming for air, her entire body trembling from adrenaline and exhaustion. Daniels grabbed her by the vest, hauling her upright. His eyes, wild and unblinking, met hers. "You're insane," he barked. But there was something else in his voice, something he couldn't hide. Respect. Kara didn't respond. She didn't need to. She simply set the M240 on its bipod, fed the ammo belt into place, and racked the charging handle with a sharp, deliberate pull. The sound, the cold, metallic clack of the weapon locking and ready, was deafening in the silence between bursts. For the first time since the ambush began, there was hope. But in that moment, none of them realized something even worse was coming. Because up on that ridge, the insurgents had started shifting positions, setting up for a flank from the west. This fight was just getting started. The sound of the charging handle echoed louder than the gunfire. For the first time in 20 minutes, 6 pinned-down SEALs had a weapon that could change everything. But Kara didn't have time to breathe, didn't have time to feel proud, because the insurgents were shifting and the flank was already moving into position. What she did next would decide who lived and who never went home. Kara Hayes lay flat behind the jagged wall, the M240 Bravo nestled tight against her shoulder, its steel body cold but familiar. Sweat poured down her temples, mixing with dirt and blood, blurring her vision. She forced a breath through dry, cracked lips, trying to steady her hands. Then, from the ridgeline above, a new sound ripped through the chaos, sharp, controlled bursts from a PCM hammering into their cover. Chicks of mud and rocks sprayed around her head. She gritted her teeth. Chief Daniels crouched low next to her, slamming a fresh mag into his M4. "Base, you get that gun up." "Locked and loaded," she yelled back, feeding the ammo belt into place. "Good," Daniels growled, peeking over the wall before ducking down as a round hissed past his ear. "Because if they get around us on that west flank, we're done." She risked a glance. Through the smoke and settling dust, she spotted them. 6 insurgents, silhouettes darting along the lower ridge, using shadows and dead ground to close the distance. The SEALs were still pinned under heavy suppressive fire from above, meaning nobody was watching the flank, except her. Her breath caught. She knew what she had to do. Kara rolled the M240 into position, the bipod legs digging into the dirt. The weapon was heavy, nearly 28 pounds of steel and firepower, but it felt like a lifeline now. She pressed her cheek to the stock, lined up her sights, and exhaled slowly. And then, she squeezed the trigger. The M240 roared to life, its deep, thunderous bursts rattling the air like rolling explosions. The recoil punched against her shoulder, jarring her entire frame, but she kept her grip steady, riding the rhythm. Tracers ripped across the valley, streaking orange in the fading light, cutting through rock and dust. 3 insurgents dropped instantly. The rest scattered, vanishing behind boulders, pinned by the sudden, overwhelming power raining down on them. Daniel slapped her shoulder hard. That's it. Keep them on their heels. But Kara wasn't just firing blindly. Every burst was controlled. 3 to 5 rounds at a time, walking the tracers into position, cutting off angles, forcing the attackers to duck or die. She knew she couldn't waste ammo. Contact left, someone shouted from behind. Kara spun her sights just in time to see 2 more enemy fighters cresting the ridge, trying to get elevation on their position. She raked the M240 across the ridgeline, the weapon's barrel glowing faintly red now from sustained fire. Both fighters collapsed before they could get into position. Her arms ached, her ears rang, her body screamed to stop, but she didn't. Not yet. The sudden roar of the M240 shifted the battle's rhythm entirely. The SEALs used the opening to maneuver. Lawson and Ramirez broke from cover, smoke grenades hissing white plumes into the air as they flanked left, climbing toward the nearest insurgent nest. From Kara's position, she watched them disappear into the haze, her heart hammering harder than the machine gun's recoil. All she could do now was hold the line. Then, without warning, an RPG screamed from the ridge, slamming into the wall less than 10 feet away. The explosion ripped the earth apart, hurling Kara backward onto her back. Her ears went dead silent, just ringing, endless ringing, as dust and smoke engulfed her vision. She coughed violently, blinking grit from her eyes, forcing herself upright. Her hands scrambled across the dirt, searching for the M240. When she found it, the barrel was smoking hot, nearly glowing. She checked the feed tray, half a belt left. Through the dust, a shadow moved. Then another. The insurgents were trying to push through the chaos. Kara slammed the weapon back into position, braced the bipod, and opened fire again. The M240 spat fire and thunder, cutting down 2 more silhouettes before they could get within 30 feet. Behind her, Daniels grabbed the radio, screaming into static. Viper 2-1, this is Hammer Lead. We are taking heavy contact. We need CAS now. But the valley walls still swallowed their signal whole. They were alone. Kara's focus narrowed until nothing else existed. Not the SEALs shouting orders, not the pounding in her chest, not even the fear clawing at the edges of her mind. There was only the weapon, the ridgeline, and the storm of incoming fire. Seconds felt like hours. Her world was an endless cycle of squeeze, fire, breathe, reload. Sweat dripped into her eyes, stinging, but she refused to blink for too long. Every time she faltered, bullets chewed closer to their position. Then, somewhere far off to the right, Lawson's voice crackled faintly over comms. First nest clear. Repeat, first nest clear. For the first time since the ambush began, Kara felt a sliver of hope cut through the terror. 1 nest down meant less fire pinning them, more room to maneuver. Hayes, shift fire 2 o'clock, Daniels barked, pointing up the slope. She pivoted the M240, adjusting her aim higher, and unleashed another devastating burst toward a cluster of rocks where muzzle flashes still danced. The roar of her gun drowned out nearly everything now. It felt like the entire valley shook with each controlled explosion of lead. Then the second SEAL team breached the second nest, close enough for Kara to see them moving through the haze. She stopped firing, taking the pressure off so they could clear the position safely. Seconds later, a single, sharp call came over comms. Second nest secure. For the first time in what felt like hours, the enemy's volume of fire dropped by half. Kara seized the opening, shifting her sights back to the flank and laying down covering bursts to pin the remaining insurgents while Daniels rallied the team. Lawson, Ramirez, push right. We're rolling up their line. The SEALs moved fast, bounding from cover to cover as Kara's suppressive fire carved lanes through the chaos. Every belt she burned was another step forward, another piece of ground retaken. But just as the fight seemed to tilt in their favor, a fresh burst of gunfire erupted from the far ridgeline. Heavier, faster, closer. Through the smoke, Kara spotted movement, a second wave of fighters climbing into position. Her stomach dropped. They weren't done, not even close. Daniel slammed next to her, reloading his M4, his face streaked with sweat and grime. Hayes, he said, his voice raw. If they get set up on that ridge, we're trapped. Kara wiped the blood and dirt from her cheek, checked her ammo, 1 belt left, and nodded. Then we stop them here. She yanked the charging handle back, pressed her cheek to the stock and steadied her aim on the approaching shadows. The barrel glowed white-hot, the metal creaking under its own heat, but she didn't care. The next 90 seconds would decide everything. She tightened her grip, exhaled slowly, and pulled the trigger. The M240 roared again, spitting fire into the fading light, her tracers slicing through smoke and dust like lightning in a storm. Every burst bought seconds. Every second meant life. But the enemy wasn't breaking. They kept coming. Pinned in a forgotten Afghan valley, 6 SEALs and 1 combat medic faced the impossible. And in the middle of that storm, Kara Hayes made a choice few would ever understand. She was going to hold this position or die trying. By the 7th minute of the firefight, the air was thick with smoke and heat. Kara's shoulders burned, her hands shook, and the M240's barrel glowed red-hot. 40 insurgents had opened the ambush. Less than half were still standing, but the rest were closing in. This was the moment everything came down to, the line between survival and silence. Kara slammed the final ammo belt into the M240. Her breath came ragged, her arms trembling, but she forced herself steady. She lined up her sights on the ridge where fresh shadows were climbing fast. "1 belt left," she shouted. Chief Daniels crouched low beside her, sweat streaking his face. "Make it count, Hayes. This is it." She squeezed the trigger, and the M240 roared one last time, spitting fire into the smoke-filled valley. Controlled bursts walked tracers across the rocks, forcing insurgents into cover and breaking their momentum. "Lawson, Ramirez, move," Daniels yelled, and the SEALs surged forward, using Kara's fire to push up the ridge. Then an insurgent appeared, RPG on his shoulder, locked on their position. Kara swung the barrel, unleashed a 4-second burst, and dropped him before he could fire, but the shift gave the others an opening. Gunfire chewed into the dirt inches from her boots. Her belt clicked empty. Silence, except for the ragged breathing around her. Kara ripped the empty belt free, searching for more ammo, but there was none. She glanced at Daniels, chest heaving. "That's it," she said. "I'm dry." Daniels gave her a grim smile. "Then we finish it the hard way." Before she could answer, Lawson's voice cracked over comms. "Second, nest secure." Kara blinked, heart pounding, as the tide shifted instantly. With their heavy weapons gone, the insurgents' fire slowed, their formations broke, and hesitation rippled through their ranks. Daniel saw it too. "Push!" he roared, surging from cover. Kara grabbed her sidearm and followed, stumbling forward on shaky legs. Together with the SEALs, they advanced, clearing the rocks and driving the remaining fighters into retreat. And then it was over. The valley fell silent, smoke drifting lazily where moments ago there had been chaos. Kara collapsed to her knees, the spent M240 beside her, the heat from its barrel shimmering in the air. Daniels crouched, his voice low and rough. "Lieutenant Hayes, you didn't just hold the line today. You saved it." For the first time, Kara allowed herself to breathe. 6 SEALs walked into an ambush. 6 SEALs walked out alive, because she refused to back down. Years later, a box was opened in a Pentagon basement. Inside, a burn-scarred M240 Bravo, faded dog tags, and a folded letter. In Chief Daniels' handwriting, it read, "For actions above and beyond the call of duty, for courage under fire when the odds were impossible, Lieutenant Kara Hayes saved my team. She saved me." Signed by a Navy SEAL commander. The letter remained classified for decades, until now. This is the story behind that letter, those medals, and the forgotten gun. The day 6 SEALs were pinned down in a hostile valley, and the medic who rewrote history.